So plants make their own food with photosynthesis using a green pigment called chlorophyll. There's some other pigments in there that are bright yellow, some of them kind of orange. They're there all season long, all summer long, until fall. And in fall, the plant shuts down its photosynthesis and it starts to try to reclaim as many nutrients as possible back from the leaf. And as it does that, it degrades its own chlorophyll, and some of those other pigments start to show through in certain species of trees. Other species of trees start to produce other red pigments in the fall in order to attract birds to their fruits. Some of them do it to scare off insects, and some of them just do it to help shield their leaves from sunlight, like a sunscreen, while they're reabsorbing those nutrients. In most trees, it's triggered by day length, so trees have other chemicals that they use to detect light, and they can tell exactly how long the day is. And in fall, when the day gets short enough, they know it's time to shut down the sugar factory and start absorbing as many of those nutrients as possible back from the leaf. Other chemical changes, like when some trees start producing red pigment, can be triggered by temperature as well. So especially on cold nights that aren't quite freezing, they don't kill the leaves, but that sort of indicate to the tree that it's getting too cold to really photosynthesize productively, they'll start to make those red pigments. In North Georgia, the trees tend to turn quicker because of the nighttime temperatures getting colder faster, because higher elevation. You lose about 5 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet up you go in elevation. Also, the further north you are, the shorter the day length gets in fall, faster. And a lot of it actually has to do with the tree composition as well. So things like oak trees tend to turn later in the fall than other things like maple trees do. And so depending on where you're at and depending on what species of trees are around, they'll start to change at different times. Here in Georgia especially, and even in the mountains of Georgia, it's pretty, but it's dominated by oaks and hickories, and the hickories are really this nice golden yellow color when they turn in the fall. Most of the oaks turn kind of brownish, and they often turn later than other trees, but a lot of people go to New England specifically to look for leaves because there's a high proportion of maples there, and maples are really good at making a lot of those red and orange pigments, and the more maples you have in your forest, the more colorful it is compared to things like oaks. So a lot of that has to do with the colors you see, like even in certain places in Georgia that have more maples than others and more hickories than others, you get a lot more color. For a lot of trees, if you make a really thin leaf, it's very good at getting getting carbon dioxide into the leaf for photosynthesis. So thin, flat leaves are really, really good for photosynthesizing and making sugar very rapidly, but they're also very bad in the wintertime because if you have a very thin leaf, it's going to freeze solid very easily. And so they have a trade-off between being a really good sugar machine in the summertime, and in fall and winter when there's less light, they just cut their losses and they drop those leaves to the ground and recycle those nutrients as much as possible. Whereas other trees are still successful, like pine trees, but they succeed by taking advantage of that season when no one else is photosynthesizing. In warm days in winter, a pine tree can still use the light that's available and photosynthesize and make some sugars, whereas all the trees that have dropped their leaves don't have that. But then come summertime, they're less efficient at doing it, especially in places where there's plenty of water.